He's got his plate and he's on his way. Lee? Jeff, would you do me a favor? Also close that door, because we fought with the noise through the first hour. The good news for those online, they actually will hear better because they don't hear the noise from the kids. Should you go home? There you go. So if you don't have a handout, Jeff has them here in the back. He'll give you one. All right, good morning. So officially being a senior citizen, you guys, I apologize, I'm going to tell the same joke. Officially being a senior citizen, I'm now allowed to tell senior citizen jokes. And I heard the following and loved it. So a little old lady is sitting at home and she's doing a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, you heard this too, right? She's doing a jigsaw puzzle. And she's got all the pieces laid out and she cannot figure out how to even begin. She's completely lost in process. She calls her neighbor and says, I need your help. Please come over and help me. Guy comes across the street, comes in the house, looks at all the pieces on the table, looks at the box. There's a rooster on the box. And he says to her, I have to tell you, there's no way these pieces are ever going to be put together in a way that looks like a rooster. Let's have some coffee. Let's relax, and let's put the cornflakes back in the box. On that note, let's take out the Siddur and open to 165. Okay. We have done the first, on Shabbat, we mentioned there's 7 blessings. The 3 of praise at the beginning, the middle blessing, which is about Shabbat itself, and then 3 blessings at the end, which are essentially, in some way, an expression of thanks. We've done the first 6. Last week we finished up with the blessing of the Kohanim, and we're up to Sim Shalom, the 7th blessing. And so let's read, we're going to read this in English. It starts, grant peace, in the middle of the page. It says, grant peace to the world, goodness and blessing, grace, love, and compassion for us and for all the people Israel. Bless us, our Creator, united as one with the light of your presence. By that light, Adonai, our God, you have given us a guide to life, the love of kindness, righteousness, blessing, compassion, life, and peace. May it please you to bless your people at every season and at all times with your gift of peace. And then the blessing at the end, Baruch atah Adonai, who blesses your people Israel with peace. Clearly there's a central theme here. The issue is peace. Peace is the greatest, considered the greatest blessing of all, and the Amidah concludes with it. The Kaddish, full Kaddish, concludes Oseh Shalom with a blessing for peace. Birkat Hamazon concludes Oseh Shalom with a blessing for peace. Those are regular prayers, our regular routines all conclude with the same concept. The dictionary defines peace in the following way. It says a state of quiet, freedom from civil disturbance, a state or order within a community provided for by law and custom, freedom from disturbing thoughts and feelings, good luck with that, harmony in personal relationships, and a state of concord between governments. Okay? There's a midrash that says there's only one commandment for which you are absolutely obligated to run after, and that is peace. All the others are as the moment happens. If it happens, great, you do a blessing, you do the mitzvah, etc. But peace is the one that you pursue. And Aaron is considered the ultimate example of peace, the high priest. He's somebody who ran after peace, as they describe him. And the Midrash says he would actually lie to people who are in conflict and say, the other one wants to make peace, come on. And then you go to the other and say, the other one wants, it reminds me of a Golden Girls episode, okay? That he lies to the two of them to say to them, the other wants peace, so they could bring them together and somehow reach it. So even a lie in this case. And if the goal is peace, you can kind of blend the other, sort of blur the other lines. Okay? The Hebrew word shalom has 3 letters: shin, lamed, mem, sofit. It's the same word, same root as the word shalem. It's just the vowels that change. Shalem means complete. And so the word shalom means peace in a way that is shalem, that it's complete peace. Shalom is peace in its perfection. And so it's not just a state of a lack of war or a lack of conflict, it's a state of harmony. The lack of war or lack of conflict is a prerequisite, but it's not necessarily the ultimate goal. That's where you start. And then it's that total sense of completeness and harmony in the world. It's an ideal to be striven for. It's not something that there's always been a war going on in the world. Every moment of history, somewhere in the world there's been conflict, and it's certainly true today, no matter where you look. Let's look at Rambam, reading number 1 in the packet. Always go to the scholars. Never mind hearing me, you need to hear from them. So let's start in the back this week. Lance, I know you taught in the back so you wouldn't have to read, so I'm going to give you a reading anyway. I apologize. Hold on, I apologize. I realize I have to do the readings. I apologize online. I have to do the readings so that everybody can hear them, okay? But you read very well. Okay. The Messiah's only purpose is to bring peace to the world. Our sages and prophets did not long for the Messianic age in order that they may rule the world and dominate the Gentiles. They only wanted one thing, and that was to be free to devote themselves to the Torah and its wisdom. They wanted nothing to disturb or distract them, in order that they should be able to strive to become worthy of life in the world to come. In the Messianic age, there will be neither war nor famine. Jealousy and competition will cease to exist, for all good things will be most plentiful, and all sorts of delicacies will be as common as dust. The main occupation of humanity will be to know God. The Jews will become great sages, knowing many things, and achieve the greatest understanding of God that is possible for a mortal human being. As the prophet Isaiah predicted, the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God as the waters that cover the sea. Maimonides is laying out what he's saying. Every nation has a goal for what they want at the end. For Jews, and they're not alone, but clearly for Jews, the goal is that sense of peace in the world. It's not domination, it's peace. At the same time, probably world war is humankind's most continuous activity. All right, if you have to pick something that goes on no matter what, war is it. Any day, someday in the world, someplace in the world, people are murdering one another in a legal fashion, meaning war. In some way, it is always happening. The causes are varied and complex. Sometimes it's for people who want more living space. You heard that under the words of Hitler. Sometimes it's a desire for more wealth. Sometimes it's to defend themselves against an invasion or domination by others. And sometimes people trying to force their ideas on others in many ways, or to resist other ideas. And sometimes it's no more than simply national pride. There are lots of reasons. Every war is not the same. Every war is not the same in terms of its basis. And no one can deny, if you look at Jewish history, it is filled with examples of war as well. Right? Indeed, the biblical record encourages the early Hebrews to engage in war in order to preserve their nation, to preserve their way of life, and yet in the same breath, Judaism deplores war and urges its people to seek peace. Thus, the justification for war and the way in which war is fought is clearly spelled out. There are limitations. With all that said, the prophets understood that you can't just allow a nation to commit suicide. You have to defend yourself. Okay, whether or not that's the case in any given war can sometimes be debatable, but the fact that you have a right to exist and defend yourself is not up for discussion. When the Jewish people are threatened with a national destruction, the prophets actually reverse the traditional image of the plowshares, and the defense of the country becomes a duty that you cannot escape. And so if you look at reading number 2, this is right out of Joel, I believe. Proclaim among the nations, prepare for battle, arouse the warriors, let the fighters come and draw near. Now listen to the next sentence. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. That is a deliberate reversal of Isaiah's words. So Joel is saying that when you're in a case of national defense, it's not time to turn the other cheek. Within a few years, it's the same period. It's somewhere during, I can't tell you, I'm guessing it's after, no, by definition. It would be before the war with the Babylonians and the destruction of the temple. Oh, it goes on further. Now I know it's Joel. There's another half to it. Let even the weakling say, I am strong. Rouse yourselves and come, all you nations. Come together from round about. There bring down your warriors, O Lord. Okay? It's very clear what he's saying. When the moment of defense is at play, you don't sit and discuss, gee, what should we do? Peacenik? No. Isaiah is predicting a time in which this will be the case, where we'll beat we will beat our swords into plowshares. That's the ultimate time. He's describing the Messianic era. Joel comes along and says, that's great, but when we're in a moment of defense, we're not in Messianic times. This is not Messianic times. Okay? The conduct of the war was just as important as the question of how do we engage in a war, who should fight in it. The conduct of how you engage in war is important. Here, as all war issues, the overarching concern has to do with how do you cause the least harm, the least damage. The Bible goes out of its way to say, if you attack a city, you leave an area where they can flee, so that if they don't want to fight, they don't have to die. After the Six-Day War in 1967, an Israeli soldier wrote a moving account of how a soldier with whom he had served was influenced by the biblical prohibition. That is the next reading. That's reading number 3. This is written by a soldier who's just been through war. In my company, we had a religious commanding officer from Kibbutz Tirat Tzvi. On the first day, after we'd gone through Jenin, we moved on to the objective and found all the Jordanians gone. We dug ourselves in there because there were reports that they might mount a mortar barrage, and we stayed there until later that night. Then we went down into the village. While we were up there, the administrative personnel had gone into the village. When we went to the base, we found the storekeepers and the cooks, all that lot, absolutely rolling in things that they had looted from the village. Wrapped in carpet, women's jewelry. It was a horrible scene. At that moment, everybody thought, for God's sake, what do they need all that stuff for? And then I remember the CEO got the whole company together, formed them all up in a semicircle, and stuck all the storekeepers and cooks in the middle along with their loot. Then he started quoting them chapter and verse of the Bible. Thou shalt not plunder. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. It was really impressive. After he finished, one of the storekeepers got up and asked him, but what about that bit in the Bible when Jehoshaphat and his men came to take away the spoil? What do you make of that? So the CEO began to explain that Rashi, commenting on the verse, says that it should be taken to mean that a conquering army takes only what it really needs during the fighting. That's to say, if they have no food, and since they had to live somehow, then they can take the food, what they need, but nothing more, no property. What is fascinating about this is writing by a soldier in 1967. We're talking about somebody who's just been through war. This is not some theoretical experience. Gee, what would I think? He's in the moment, and the specifics don't matter. It's that in the moment he's taking the time to say there's a morality to what we're doing, and we won't tolerate the lack thereof. Any kind of responses? It does seem that way, yeah. They went in afterwards and took what was very convenient, all right? And they held them accountable for it. There are morals even in war. That is not the way war is fought in most of the world. So therefore, this is saying that you have to stop. Even in the moment when you're defending, you're entitled to the war, there's still a way to fight the war. Right. It's the IDF, I'm just repeating, it's part of the IDF doctrine, security of arms, purity of arms. Okay. Yeah. Right? And we hope, look, there's no such thing as any demographic where people don't do wrong things. There's just not. And as much as I'd like to believe every Israeli soldier is always doing the right thing, why would we expect as a collective for them not to represent humanity? They do. But there is a goal. There is a goal, and oftentimes those people are held accountable, which is not something you see elsewhere. People, every demographic has its people who miss the mark, and that's the kindest way I can put it. So I want to read with you a couple sections that are right out of Brad Artson's book. I think, Sandy, you read the book, borrowed the war, Seeking Peace, right? You borrowed it from me. Yes, okay. Anyway, the good news is then maybe this won't strike a bell. Okay, so out of Isaiah, he's quoting you a number of texts here. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Neither shall they learn war anymore. That's Isaiah. It is such a dominant text that we all know it. Okay? Number 2 from, all right, there's some, here. Number 2, I wanted to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, but the words of the Lord came to me saying, you have shed much blood and fought great battles. You shall not build a temple, a house for my name, for you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight. So even though the battles were endorsed by God, nonetheless, your character is affected by what it is, and you, David, are not the one to build the temple. Solomon will do that. Okay, number 3. What is the difference? This is Shlomo Carlebach. What is the difference between a Jewish soldier and a non-Jewish soldier? When a non-Jewish soldier shoots a gun, he's hoping that the bullet will find its mark. When a Jewish soldier shoots the gun, he is hoping that between the moment he pulls the trigger and the moment the bullet hits, God will perform a miracle and there will not have to be any more wars ever again. It's very lovely. I mean, obviously, it's meant to be taken very theoretically. It's not real, okay? But he's saying for the Jewish, hopefully, the Jewish goal is peace. There's a struggle with even taking a life in war. 4, I am certain that as I am dictating these words, about the stoniest German heart will melt if only the Jews adopt active nonviolence. Human nature unfailingly responds to the advances of love. And do not despair of Hitler's responding to human suffering, even though caused by him. That's Gandhi. Wrong. Wrong. That is messianic times. Yes, at some point when the world is in a state of perfection, great. But Judaism says when you are being attacked, you don't just say, oh, come on in, kill my kids. That's just not an option. So the next thing is how to fight a war Jewishly. This again is from Brad Artson. In a Jewish tradition, war is a last resort. We are commanded by the Torah to ask for and offer peace prior to the beginning of any attack. To making the offer, let's find a way to compromise before this happens. Even in the midst of waging war, the Bible is clear, ecological needs of the environment must be preserved. The Bible is clear, you don't attack, you make sure the trees, if any, at all possible, trees representing nature, can resist whatever it is you're doing. And that's more and more common as our weapons become, more and more problematic as our weapons expand. And we know when you drop a bomb, it's not just hitting the person. In the ancient world, you see went in with a sword, okay? Right. But that was, and Jews don't, in other words, they made a deliberate effort to destroy the land. And again, one of the things Muslim tradition suggests that when you conquer a religious site, you build another religious site on top of it, which is the same message, destroy what's there and build upon. That's why there is, on top of the temple, a mosque. It's what they did everywhere. It wasn't a particular attack on the Jews. That was their process. Jews took a very different approach. Right. Right. They made distinctions, right. So anything that has the potential for affecting human life, which is food bearing, I don't think they had a concept of cutting down trees eliminates air and all sorts of other things. Right? That wasn't in their mindset. But the fruit bearing trees in particular, you're correct. Number 3, when actually in battle, a Jewish army, this is what I said, is never allowed to completely surround the enemy on all 4 sides in order to allow those who wish to run away and escape to do so, and thus prevent needless bloodshed. Now, again, that is very lovely, but it means if you're surrounding a city and Hamas all runs out of the city, you haven't necessarily achieved your goal. But this is, in the big picture, what your hope is to be. Okay? 4. Judaism not only legislates the behavior of war, but reminds Jews how they should feel in victory as well. Passover Seder, right? Okay? One is not permitted to rejoice at the downfall of an enemy, for every human being is created in the image of God. You have to do this. You may need to do this for the sake of defense, but you still are not, you've taken life in process, and that is not irrelevant because everyone is creating God's image. All life, even when you have to do what you have to do, is still precious. 5, defensive war is absolutely legitimate in Jewish tradition. Helping our people who are threatened or in danger is considered a defensive war. Even a preemptive strike, merely anticipating an upcoming war by an enemy, is considered a defensive war, and I put in parentheses, 6-day war. We knew what was coming. And then 6, for Judaism, life has the highest value, as each life has the infinite value of an entire world. The Talmud teaches that if you destroy one life, you've destroyed an entire world because of all the descendants that would have come from that individual. Each individual has been created in the image of God, and therefore when you kill someone, even when endorsed, there's a spark of God lost. Comments, thoughts? I mean, obviously we're in war, and so it makes it all the more real. Mm-hmm. So the question is, when you're at war, do you continue the war until the entire enemy is destroyed at the expense of innocent life? Well, the first thing is there's the ideal, and then there's on the ground practicality, and you're always striving for the ideal, but at the same time trying to figure out how do I make that work. Right? So you have to understand that context in terms of the whole discussion. And it obviously has very strong implications. I see you, Steve, you're next. Very strong implications for what's going on in Israel right now. I mean, I think that's underlying your question. When is enough enough? All right. I don't know that I have an answer that's very clear. I can say I don't think it's really a possibility to destroy an ideology. I don't think it's possible to eliminate everyone who believes something destructive. America didn't do it with the Taliban. We were unsuccessful. The most powerful nation in the world didn't achieve that goal. I don't believe Israel will be able to achieve it either. We can do a lot. We can do a lot to say, essentially, if you do this, there's going to be a lot of suffering. But if we believe in 100% elimination of it, I don't think that's even a possibility. So I don't know where the line is. I don't know, mine's far greater than mine, or struggle with the same issue. I don't know where that line is. There's a discomfort because we see what we see on TV, and people in the world now know, plain and simply, war is never clean. There's been no war in history where innocents weren't killed. It's simply a fact of war. Read any of the books from the Civil War and the soldiers who wrote about their experience, and you'll see the same pain and struggles in their writings. It's fictional, non-fictional, all of them describe that same kind of pain. Innocent people die in war, and therefore what's the goal? Shalom, shalem, shalom. Complete peace. That's the ideal. That's where we're striving for, because war is dirty. All right. At the same time, I hope that in process, our soldiers, and I say the Israeli soldiers, are not doing things that are unethical. Hearing when Hamas did their bombing on October 7th and they went in and they raped the women and everything else, that's not war. That's not war. That's just immoral. Oh, yeah, you were next. Yeah. Yeah, Steve, and then yes, Eric.
And God told Saul to kill everything that breathes.
Yep.
And
he doesn't.
doesn't.
So let me just repeat your question. So in the Bible, the story of in Samuel, Saul is commanded to attack the entire nation and leave nothing alive afterwards, and is ultimately punished because he doesn't do that. All right. So now keep going. All right, so one of the survivors of that war fathered someone who plagued the Jewish people for centuries to come. Yeah, that is possible. But the only thing I would say to you is your N is one, meaning there's one story. How many times has it worked out positively? In this case, you're right, and God punishes him, etc., and it's clear. But when your sampling is one story, you at least have to look at a larger picture before you reach the conclusion. And here again, we're assuming it's God's hand. We see God in the action, and God is giving a direct order. Most of us don't have direct orders from God. All right? And so how does that fit? I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but it isn't real that you're going to get every one of them. It's just not. And how many Israeli soldiers have to die to get every one of them? That's also a measure of what is going on. When you see, this weekend, you see Nico come in. He's part of the IDF, and he was here for the bar mitzvah, and I look and say, I love Nico. I'm not sure how much, do I want to sacrifice his life? Where's the line? Yeah. So Harold Schulweis objected to the Haftarah prior to Purim, in which there's a slaying of an Amalekite. Right. Right. So he substituted another Haftarah in its place. And just, you'll hear, I'm going to talk about this next time we meet in the Haftarah. Originally, at one point, what was read for the Haftarah was really the person who read it would choose. It was only later that it was fixed. And so that's consistent. It's not like he's done something with no precedent. And oftentimes we have multiple Haftarot that are, you see, there's an Ashkenazic and a Sephardic. Why is that? Because they chose a different Haftarah to represent the theme. Okay, so there obviously were different traditions. And so he's justified in doing what he did because there's precedent for it in Jewish tradition. Right. The whole genocidal notion bothered him to such a degree he was willing to get. And by the way, we've done that. If you look at the Torah reading for Mincha on Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, it talks about all sorts of things, including the sexual relations that are inappropriate, including homosexuality, etc. That's not the reading we do anymore. The conservative movement has shifted to an alternative reading. It's not like, well, that was ordained. Those 10 verses need to be on Yom Kippur. It's not ordained from heaven. The whole Torah is ordained, so we can pick a different reading. We're not getting rid of Torah. We're just reading a different section. It's the same concept. Others? Right, so the atomic bombing of Japan raises the same kinds of questions. We ended the war at a huge cost to a lot of civilians in process, and there's all sorts of morality questions that come out of it, and I'm not here to tell you yes or no. There's lots of books. Robert Lofton wrote a wonderful book that explored the entire experience from a Japanese experience, and it's a good read. I'm not here to tell you. I can tell you, some would posit that we actually saved more Japanese lives in process. Go prove that. And they may be right. I'm not going to tell you they're wrong, but I can't tell you they're right either. Yes, but did we kill more civilians in that than we would have killed in a regular war? No one knows the answer to that. What I can tell you is the world has learned there's not been another atomic bomb since. So there's all sorts of, as much as Russia and the United States were engaged in this nuclear war, that was sort of, let's walk around this as much as we can. All right. Again, another incredible book that just came out, a book on nuclear war, posits a woman got into the files. I know I'm way off base here. A woman got into the files. They let her into the access to the documents that were open from the 60s and 70s of what the government was thinking during this time. And from those documents creates a scenario in which North Korea launches a weapon. It would take about 8 or 9 minutes to land in New York or Washington or wherever they wanted it to. And Reagan himself said basically the president has 2 minutes from informing of what's going on to make a decision. There's no cabinet meetings. There's 2 minutes. And if it plays out, the world, because of the way everybody would interact the war, in order for the United States to attack North Korea, they'd have to launch bombs that go over China, that go over Russia, etc. Russia would then respond. Within 12 minutes, the world will be destroyed. It's not, let's all talk about it. Brilliant writing. It's in my office, anybody's interested. It was devastating and brilliant, all at once. I have the book in my office. I don't remember its name. I didn't understand. Say that again. According to the biblical, it's one of the small, minor prophets, Ovadia. Yeah. All these saviors, as it described in Ovadia, yeah. In Sav, I'm not sure what that means. Okay. In what? Oh, Esav. Okay. Esau, yeah. So it's labeling the enemies as Esau. Okay. Right, so in other words, what Jews have done historically is label the enemies in biblical terms. Okay, so Esau becomes representative of the enemies. You have the Mosheim, whoever they are, the saviors of the people. And it's if I understand your question correct, or I understand what you're saying, it's that we don't understand who is what label, because we're always making sense of it and putting it into context of history, of Jewish history. But it's projecting some future harmony. It's the future harmony that they're aiming at. It's hard always to know who your enemies are. Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's not so easy. You know, sometimes they've been in hiding for a long time, America. Okay? Right. So in other words, in Messianic times, when the Messiah comes, this will all be defined for us. It'll be clear. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Yeah, and that is a Jewish thought process, but it's also a way of saying we don't get it. And at some point, God will answer the question. We don't know. We don't have an answer now. At some point, the Messiah will come and bring us an answer to our question. Yeah, I don't necessarily embrace that, but is that a fundamental belief among a significant population within Judaism? Yes. Yeah, we don't know. This is the argument of Dayan Ha'emet, that God is the true judge. We don't understand what's going on, and when the Messiah comes, we'll get our answers. Yeah. All right. Let's shift to 168. We sing this out loud every week. Let's look at it. Ein kamocha. There's none like you, Elohim. Ein kamocha va'Elohim. Adonai, Adonai, Elohim, Adonai. Elohim is God, and Adonai is a specific name for God. V'ein kamasecha, there's nothing like your deeds. How do they translate? There's nothing compares to you, Adonai, and nothing is like your creation. Okay, it's close. Malchutecha, malchut kol olamim, your sovereignty is eternal. Your dominion endures in every generation. Basically, it's saying the same thing twice. It's a biblical dyadic form, and they say the same thing twice in poetry form. Adonai is sovereign. Adonai always has been sovereign. Adonai will forever be sovereign. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch. It's the same word 3 times with different vowels and implies different tenses. You are the king. You will be the king. You were the king. It's eternal. Okay. Adonai gives strength to your people. Adonai bless your people with peace. Compassionate creature, may it be your will that Zion flourish. Build the walls of Jerusalem, for in you alone do we put our trust, transcendent, sovereign, master of all time. Okay, first paragraph. Let's talk about the Torah service and the Torah reading itself in general. The public reading of Torah has occurred since ancient times. The Torah itself prescribes, the way it should be read theoretically according to the Torah, is every 7 years, you get together for a community event and you read the entire Torah to the people, out loud. It's a way of revering God. It's a way of learning to understand what it is God wants of you. This public reading differentiates itself from many of the religions of the ancient time, including, by the way, during that time, Christianity. Until the printing press, it was the books of the Bible, the books of any holy text, were basically the property of the priests, and they controlled what was out. If you go back to the Middle Ages in Christianity, you're going to see how did they know what the Bible was and what the Bible for a Christian said? They either went to a sermon on Sunday morning, where the priests would elaborate on some text, or there were plays. And for them, plays were real. So you had the passion created in front of you. And they didn't have there was no suspension of disbelief. They believed that we were actually seeing it. Today's world is with TV and everything else, we understand there's a better sense of that doesn't make it real. Okay? But here it's happening in the church. It's the only exposure they have to the Bible. It's very real. Okay, so Judaism, by putting its text out to the larger population and making it available, they would read it all the time, set itself apart, and made it a democratic document available to everybody. Okay? 2 different traditions arise. You have one in Israel and one in Babylonia. In Israel, the Torah is broken into 155 portions, and they take 3 years to go through the entire Torah, triennial reading. In Babylonia, they break it into 54 portions, and they read the entire thing every year. That's what justifies the reading of a triennial reading like we do in a synagogue like this. There is historical precedent for it. We didn't just create it because it was nice. We thought it would be better to teach more Torah, read less and teach more in the conservative movement. But there actually is a model. That's what they did in Israel. That was the custom of Israel in the ancient times. And so there's precedent for this. Yeah. Yeah. So let me repeat that, 1 for online and 2 to make sure everybody understands what you said. So in what they would do, we have the parasha, we have 12 parashot in Genesis. What we do is we read the first third of one, and then we read the first third of the second, and then we read the first third of the third, and we go through all 12 and read the first third. In year 2, we read the second third of each. What they did was read in 3 weeks, take the first portion and read 1, 2, 3. It took 4 weeks to get to the second portion. Yeah, so how it's enacted is different. I think what the rabbis were trying to do in terms of what we do today was to keep us in the same cycle as the world around us. In other words, we're all reading it from the same section in Israel, in Orthodox, in Reform, in Conservative. We're reading of the same section at the same time. It keeps us in a sense, a unified world process. Okay? But you're right, it is different. You're 100% right. Now, reading of Torah is actually more ancient than prayer, than the tefillah itself. I mean, we were reading Torah from the time of Ezra. Prayer develops really formally later, but it's only natural then to begin to associate the two and bring them together. What you've got then is a dialogue. You've got man speaking to God in prayer. You take out the Torah, and it's God speaking to man. Okay? They've created this dialogue. The power, I really want to emphasize the power of making it public. The result is we become a very educated people. We're reading this constantly. The blessing we finish when we recite the Torah finishes out. It doesn't say Natan HaTorah, who gave the Torah. It says Noten HaTorah, who gives the Torah. It's like it is being given to us every single week. And what changes, our job is to make sense of it each week, each time we read it. That's called interpretation. That's called midrash. And to make it real for life. So each time we read Torah, it's God giving it, not God gave it. That's what the rabbis did. They interpreted. They made it live. They made it real. They made it work for society. Yes.
When the Torah is brought out and held up, I see some people holding their finger out.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, look, what do we do when we march the Torah around? Everybody reaches out to it. It's the same thing. In other words, I'm reaching out to Torah. I'm pursuing Torah. It's a symbolic action. Yeah, and it communicates I'm embracing that. That's me. Right. I'm endorsing it. Yep. All right. Boy, did I overestimate where we were going to get. I got to get better at this. So the reading of the Torah, in a sense, and you've heard me say this many times, we open the service. If you look at that opening section, it is not, the Torah service is not about Torah in the beginning. It is all about God. The Torah service starts, Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai v'ein k'maasecha. There's none like you, God Adonai, and nothing like your actions. Where's the word Torah? You don't get, let me see, where do we first get the Torah? Adonai yivarech and amova shalom, av harachamim mitiv v'yusenecha tivnecha. It's in the second. All right, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah is at the very bottom of the page. And even where it is mentioned as it's going out of Jerusalem at God's direction. Torah is not the focus of this section of the Torah service. It's a byproduct. It's all about God. And what we're doing when we take the Torah out is recreating the theophany at Sinai. We're recreating that sense of getting Torah from God. You can see the rabbis creating that in the sense that no Torah reading may ever have, when you do a full Torah reading, like a morning reading, you can never have less than 10 verses. What does 10 mean to you? The Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. It's that same recreating of what is happening at Sinai. It's meant to make you think that you are reliving like you do on Passover, you relive the Exodus. When we do this, we're reliving Sinai. It also, and this I know I've said 100 times in the Bima, why do we walk it around in the congregation? Why do we take the Torah and walk around? Because when you install a king, he marches through the people. The ceremony of the installation is to be announce, you're embracing me as king, I'm walking around amongst you. We don't have God sitting here, we only have God's words. And so we take the Torah around as a way of announcing God's sovereignty. And everybody reaches out, not only to Torah, but you're reaching out to God and embracing God's Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimel. God is sovereign and king. We sing those words. Right, right. Again, it's that democratic idea, and I use the word not in a political sense. It's a democratic idea of everybody has equal status. We all stand before God. We all embrace Torah in our relationship with God. Okay? That's absolutely the message that's going on here. And then they have rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. You have this hint of messianic times, when God's presence will fully fill the world as we understand it. Malo kol haaretz kevodo, his glory is felt throughout everything. The ark is open. We haven't even gotten to the second paragraph. The ark is open. Let's read what we say. It says, towards the bottom of the page, as the ark was carried forward, Moses would say, Adonai, rise up and scatter your foes so that your enemies flee your presence. V'yafutzu oyavecha, and your enemies will be scattered. Torah shall go forth from Zion, the word of Adonai from Jerusalem. Praised is the one who gave Torah to the people of Israel in holiness. All right, B'kedushato, in kedusha. And so, the top section is as it begins, is very universalistic. The whole world, God will rule. And then it becomes very particularistic about Judaism, about walls of temple and ultimate times. You've gone from large picture world to small picture the Jewish people who live within that world. That's really important to understand. It's contextual comments. And then we have, and this is where I'm going to stop. If you turn to page 160, not 170, you may or may not notice it shifts from Hebrew to Aramaic. One of the best ways to recognize, look at the last word on the first line. Often in Hebrew, the last letter of a word will be a hey. In Aramaic, it's an aleph. All right? So alma, olam, olama would be with a hey. And when you see a lot of aleph at the end of a word, you're generally not you're speaking Aramaic. It's using the same letters, like Spanish and English, okay? But not necessarily. And the words we recognize a lot of Spanish words in English and English words in Spanish. There's a lot of exchange, but they're not exactly the same. And this was the lingua franca. This Aramaic was the language they spoke in their daily lives. And so what that's telling you is this is a personal prayer. This was added as a personal prayer. You can almost say what you want in this moment. The rabbis who fixed the service in its place and said, these are the things you have to say, also said that if that's all you do, you haven't prayed. There's a place for personal prayer in process. And so you see these insertions of personal prayer. I have my own thoughts that I go through when I say this.
Is that because people in Aramaic, that was the spoken language?
Right. Right. It was, as I said, lingua franca. It's the language they spoke at the time. So they shifted to their comfortable language because it was personal. This is not a communal prayer. And I just want to look at the last few words here where it has the little arrow on 170 in the English. This is Be'anarachetz. What are we singing? It is in God that I put my trust. All right? And it is to your holy and precious name that I utter praise. May it be your will that you open my heart to your Torah, that you fulfill the desires of my heart and the hearts of all your people Israel, for goodness, for life, and for peace. Amen. Even the personal prayer is not about Torah. It's about relationship with God. Torah is a symbol. I gave a sermon a couple of weeks ago of the danger of allowing Torah to take the place of God. It is God's word, but at the end of the day, its purpose is to drive us to God. On its own, without that, it's a valueless document. Yes, Yeah, that's exactly exactly. We get too wrapped up in our worship of Torah, and that sometimes, unless it almost becomes an idol if you don't connect it with your relationship with God. It becomes an idol. And I think of what in my mind, we pray, Torahs are covered. We don't even see them. That's not an accident. That's not what we're worshiping. Okay? That's what we're worshiping. Above the ark, in a sense. The Torah is God's words. It's the closest we can get to understanding what God wants of us. It's the closest we can get to a state of Kedusha through its actions. But ultimately, it's a tool. It's a means, not an ends. It's a means to God. Fair enough? All right. Next week, what I want to do, I thought for sure we were going to get through this. I'm going to take we're going to begin with, on the holidays, we're saying Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum, God is compassionate, etc. We're going to start there, and we'll go through the rest of we'll go through the rest of the Torah service. Yeah, not a chance. Next week, January 5th and January 12th. And that does it. At that point, we're going to end. I scheduled a few sessions last year in the spring very deliberately to start the class because I knew that once Rabbi Teller goes on sabbatical, funerals, everything else, my consistency is not going to be predictable. And so I did 3 of the classes last year as well to kind of lead it off. So we have 2 more sessions. Next year, what I'm going to do, just so you know, I spoke with the rabbi. We need more Shachari daveners. People who can daven. So next year I'm going to change the notion of what I'm doing, and I'm going to teach people how to lead shacharit. So that when I leave, there'll be a cadre of daveners. That's the goal. Okay? Questions, thoughts, comments, abuses? January 5th. Next one is January 5th, right? Right. How far did I get? I got about halfway through my notes. It's good. It's good. It's good to be over-prepared, right?
Well, it's also your inviting participation.
Yeah.